selling millions of copies each year for what many say is now just the same game re-released every August. Madden is a franchise that has been around for decades. While it's now considered the definitive football game and has been for years, it wasn't the only pigskin thrower on the block. For several console generations, there were a plethora of funny, crazy, and even better football games to get your fix while throwing 80-yard Hail Marys to feel like the game-winning quarterback. Before yearly roster updates of real NFL teams, there were options, arcadey, blitzy fun, fevery, street-style insanity attempts at the sport, where even mutants were trying to break into the league. So let's look back at football video games that we all loved before EA killed them all. For over 2 decades, and spanning multiple console generations, many different football games would be released as the sport's popularity continued to grow. Early football games wouldn't have actual players or team branding, but would simply have the city and simple colorways to color the dots on the screen. One of the first games to actually have NFL branding would be NFL Football, released in 1980 for the Intellivision. This is the first game to be licensed by the NFL, but weirdly, they didn't include players or teams, just using the NFL logo on the box. It wouldn't be until several years later, in 1989, when NFL was released, that you could finally play as your favorite team. Developed by Atlas, yes, that Atlas, and LJN, yes, that LJN. NFL would include your favorite team, but not your favorite player, as they didn't have the player's likeness rights. That license was given to another game. Tecmo Bowl, also released in 1989 by Tecmo on the NES, would have the rights from the NFL Players Association to include players' names and likeness, but it wouldn't be able to have team branding, instead opting for 12 generic teams with just city names. With the success of these games, we would start to see an explosion of football games in the 90s, with games like NES's Play Action, Super Play Action, Sega Genesis Joe Montana Football, John Madden Football, and of course, Mutant League Football. These releases would have generic players and teams, as they wouldn't be licensed by the NFL. It wouldn't be until 1991 with the sequel Tecmo Super Bowl that you would first be able to play as your favorite team and player. This would be the first and only NES football game with real teams and players. It would also be one of the most expensive NES games at the time of release, selling for a whopping $54.99. It would be considered one of the best NES games by Games Radar, and in the list of top influential games by PC Magazine. Following Tecmo Super Bowl success, games like NFL Sports Talk 93 and NFL QB Club would also have an NFL license to include teams and players. There are other games like Troy Aikman Football that would have just an NFL license and no player likeness, or games like Emmitt Smith Football and Sterling Sharp Football having the likeness of just those single players with no NFL or player license. With new generations of consoles like Sony's PlayStation and Nintendo's 64-bit would come numerous other football games, all sporting real NFL teams and players with their own licensing deals. Games like NFL Quarterback Club by Acclaim would have 8 games over the years from 1994 to 2001. NFL Gameday would be a series that would compete with Madden, with yearly releases between 1995 and 2005. NFL Blitz was an over-the-top arcade football game that would have several installments from 1997 to 2012. Then there were games like NFL Primetime 2002 or Microsoft Studios' release NFL Fever, which would release 4 games from 1999 to 2003. And of course, there's the NFL 2K series, but we'll talk more about that later. From the early 90s to the early 2000s, these series and football games would release and compete with what was considered to be the best series, John Madden Football. The juggernaut that is the Madden series would first begin in 1990 when John Madden Football released originally for the Sega Genesis. Developed by Park Place Productions and published by Electronic Arts, the game only had 16 unofficial teams as they didn't have licensing permission from the NFL or the Players Association. A Super Nintendo version would be released a year later that would include 28 teams from NFL cities, but with no licensing, they would be generic teams. John Madden Football would become a yearly release for Electronic Arts' EA Sports branding. It wouldn't be until Madden NFL 94, released in 1993, that the game would first have NFL licensing and branding. Madden NFL 94 would have NFL logos and uniforms, but still would be without the Players Association license, meaning no player names or likenesses, only having player numbers. The next year, in 1994, Madden NFL 95 would be the first Madden game to have an NFL and Player Association license. Releasing only on the Sega Genesis, this year's Madden is considered to be one of the series' best. Madden NFL 97 would be the first to release on a PlayStation console and would be one of the best-selling games on the system that year. In 1997, Madden 64 would release on the Nintendo 64. This would be an upgraded version of Madden 98, but with one caveat. Due to licensing, Acclaim Entertainment would have exclusive rights to the NFL license on the Nintendo 64 that year. Even with real players in Madden 64, it would be without NFL licensing. Acclaim's NFL Quarterback Club 98 would outsell Madden 64 on the console. The next game, Madden 99, would release on PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Windows. With a full NFL and Players Association license and the addition of a new franchise mode, this Madden 99 would end up selling over 1.1 million copies on PlayStation alone. Madden 01, released in 2000, would be the first to release on the PlayStation 2 and the first to have a player prominently on the cover, beginning a tradition that still stands today. The early 2000s would see Madden grow in popularity and add many cool and different modes to the game. Madden 03 would receive universal praise for the PS2 version, and Madden 04 would introduce a new owner mode as well as a preseason mode. Even with all its success and praise, the new century continued to bring stiff competition in the football simulation world in the form of Madden's toughest competitor, that being the NFL 2K series. With the release of the Dreamcast on 9/9/99, Sega would develop its own football game, starting with NFL 2K, since EA decided not to publish Madden on the console. Developed by Visual Concepts and published by Sega, the first game in the NFL 2K series would receive a positive reception with scores of 9 out of 10 and praising the visuals, presentation, and the fun addictive gameplay. After being nominated for a handful of awards, Sega would commit to yearly releases. NFL 2K1 would be released in 2000 to universal praise and critical acclaim. The game would have improvements across the board and would now include online play. NFL 2K1 would not only outsell the PS2 version of Madden 01, selling over 60,000 units in its first 2 weeks, but would also win Sports Game of the Year from Electronic Gaming Monthly, along with many other awards. It would have a Metacritic of 97, while Madden 01 had a Metacritic of 91. After Sega discontinued the Dreamcast in 2001, they would continue to publish the NFL 2K series on other consoles as well. NFL 2K2 would release on PS2 and Xbox, becoming a true Madden competitor. It would have a Metacritic of 90, compared to the Metacritic of 94 for Madden 02. NFL 2K3 was released in 2002 on PS2, Xbox, and the GameCube. This would be the first to have licensing from ESPN with presentation in the form of SportsCenter, and even have host Dan Patrick. NFL 2K3 would be the first to have Xbox Live, which would include improved franchise mode, have interactive menus, and real-life current coaches. Sitting with a Metacritic of 92, NFL 2K3 would win multiple awards on different platforms. NFL 2K4 would see the series rebranding its name to ESPN NFL Football. This year's installment would include a first-person view, player apartments, and a trophy room, also with more ESPN anchors like Chris Berman and Suzy Kolber. NFL 2K4 would receive universal acclaim and currently holds a 91 on Metacritic. We can compare this to Madden 04, which received a Metacritic of 94. 2004 would be a monumental year for football games. NFL 2K5 would release with a reduced price point, causing it to sell really well, and at the same time reduce the sales of EA Sports Madden series. Even with universal praise, numerous awards, and talk of calling it one of the greatest sports video games ever made, it would be the last NFL 2 game ever. would have a Metacritic score of 92, compared to Madden 05, which had a Metacritic score of a 91. Not even 6 months after NFL 2K5's release, EA would go on to sign an exclusive deal with the NFL and the Players Association to make football video games. After years of serious competition from the NFL 2K series, Madden would become the sole football sim game to be licensed by the NFL and its Players Association. In December 2004, EA would acquire the exclusive rights, in effect killing all other football simulation games. Long-standing series like NFL 2K and NFL Gameday would stop, and the NFL Blitz series would try to continue on with just fictitious players. Madden 06 would be the only official NFL football game in 2005, with Madden being the only football game year after year for nearly the past 20 years. With exclusivity, EA's Madden series would continue to grow in popularity, even having trends and excitement of who would be the next cover athlete each year. A golden age of Madden would prosper in popularity and pop culture, but this wouldn't be reflected in the quality. Since having exclusivity, Madden hasn't had a Metacritic score over 90 or better, with scores usually in the low 80s and high 70s. This trend of lower quality leads to how Madden now feels like the same game year every year, not offering anything new and simply becoming all about roster updates. It also leads to the fans saying exclusivity has hurt the series and football games in general. The popularity of Madden still reigns supreme, with it still selling millions of copies every year, but there is still criticism of little innovation and just being about roster updates. There's no denying the popularity and lasting effect of the franchise in pop culture. And the fact that football is a ratings crusher during its season, it is still sad to see the fun football and different takes that we have lost. It's hard to deny the fact that with the NFL exclusivity being bought, that EA killed not only the NFL 2K franchise, but also several other cool, fun, and exciting football games. So what do you think about EA's exclusivity deal? And what's your favorite football game to play? Comment below, be sure to like the video, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into retro video games. If you enjoyed this video, watch our other one on how Gears of War changed gaming. For the Retro Scene, I'm Drew. Thanks for stopping by.